Okay, hello everyone! My name is Eliza from Lamplight Productions. Yeah, you're hearing my voice now, which is not usual for my speed paint videos, but yeah, I just thought I'd try something a little bit different with this speed paint. This is gonna be largely unedited content, so if there's any awkward pauses or if you could just hear my breath too much, yeah, I just don't want to edit audio because anyone who has edited audio knows that it is the physical embodiment of suffering. So yeah. A little bit of background about this piece that I'm currently doing. This is a redraw of a piece of artwork that I did back in 2017. You can still find that old artwork online right now, actually. Yeah, 2017, that would have made me 15 years old when I made it. I was really proud of it at the time, and I have been wanting to redraw it for years upon years upon years, and yeah, I'm just now finally getting around to it. Well, just now having finally gotten around to it, considering it's, done now that I am recording this voiceover. Yeah. So this is based off of the game Wizard101. I'm sure that some of you have probably heard of it before. It was a very big thing back in the early 2000s. Well, maybe very big isn't quite the right word, but it wasn't just yeah. It was fairly popular. It still is actually fairly popular, considering the thing is 15 years old as of this year. Yeah. So, for anyone who maybe doesn't know, Wizard101 is a game where you play as a wizard and go around stopping evil forces throughout the world of the Spiral. And it was and still is one of my very, very favorite games. If you look back at it now, it is definitely a little bit dated. In terms of the graphics mostly, but everything else about the game still holds up so well. And it doesn't matter how many years it's been, I always come back to Wizard101. Yeah, it was a huge part of my childhood, and I still love it to this day, hence why I'm remaking this speed paint. Remaking this artwork in speed paint form. I originally made this, like I said, back in 2017, when my wizard, who is a member of the Storm School, was high enough level to get the Leviathan spell. And it's about what it sounds like. You summon a giant Leviathan to go and beat down upon your foes, and it's so freaking cool. So I originally made this as celebration of me getting that spell and just wanting to show what I imagine it to look like, because in-game animations are always a little bit they don't quite capture everything that goes on in your head, especially in turn-based games like Wizard101 who have a set battle system, and you can only show spells in a certain arrangement. But yeah, it is just such a cool spell. It's one of my favorites, and that's why I originally made this piece, was just to be hey, I got this spell and it's really freaking cool. Let me draw some fan art of it. The sketch came fairly easily for this one. I took some reference photos of myself, used that for the pose for the wizard, and then just kind of went with the flow for the Leviathan, and it was going really good. And then we hit the blocking in stage with all the colors that you're seeing now on the screen. And yeah, it was pretty bad. Once I blocked in all the colors, I was just okay, where do I go now? For context, I had taken a break from drawing. I just wasn't in quite the right headspace or physical space to sit down and draw. I was having a lot of pain drawing, just chronic pain that I can't really get rid of that easily. Yeah, it makes it hard to just sit down and draw something, and emotionally, physically. I was living in student housing, with 3 other roommates who annoyed me so much. Those of you who have lived through the terror that is student housing, you know this. Those of you who haven't quite gotten to that point yet, beware. It will either be the best or the absolute worst thing you will ever experience. So yeah, it was just a particularly rough time, and every single time I opened up the program to work on this, I would just like, no matter how motivated I was before, immediately I would just be like, okay, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to close this program right now. So, yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to get past that initial blocking phase to get into the shading phase, which is coming up a little bit later. Yeah, dude, art is the weirdest thing. Things that you would never expect to affect it would absolutely affect it. Like where you are, how you're feeling, whatever's going on in your life. Like it's a mess, man. Yeah, so I actually started this piece way back in December of 2022, and I finished it in September of 2023. It was quite the long haul, but like, dude, it was so worth it. If you follow me on Instagram, which is where I primarily post artwork right now, although that's probably going to change in the near future because Instagram freaking sucks for artists. Anyways, if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that the style that I chose for this painting is not at all my usual. I generally do very cartoony, like heavy line work, solid colors, cell shading kind of stuff. Sometimes I paint and I do enjoy doing this more painterly style, but it had just been so long since I had done something in this style that I had to relearn everything that I knew. And I have not studied how to do this kind of style. Everything you see on the screen from here on is just me making it up as I go. And it had been so long since I made a speed paint in something like this kind of style that I forgot how much just like trust the process there is in painting. I really wish that I had like taken a photo or something of like where I started feeling that, but like it was pretty much as soon as I started the shading, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I am not a classically trained artist. I did not go to art school. Pretty much everything that I know is self-taught except for one college class, which helped me improve like a lot, but that was pretty much just like solid drawing. And yeah, like that's the only thing I got from that class. So it helped me improve, but everything else is self-taught. And you can really tell that it is just by what I'm doing here. Like I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. I'm making palettes, I'm shading things in really bizarre ways. Like I am just trying to find a path. And this part of the art process gets lost with a lot of people who are not artists. So art is not just the final product. For me and a lot of other artists, art comes in the process of making it. And the process of making this was both one of the hardest and the most satisfying things I have ever done. Just because I had to teach myself so many things and I made so many new discoveries, like how just like a pure black or almost pure black can really add such depth to the shadows, and a pure white can add such depth and emotion and life to the highlights. And yeah, it was a lot. I definitely learned a lot in the making of this painting. Yeah, it cannot be understated how much I learned during this that I will probably forget the next time that I ever do something in this style. I just don't do it often enough to like solidly understand what I'm doing. I'm just throwing color at the screen and seeing what sticks. This technique that I'm doing here right now for the scales on the Leviathan is actually something that I saw on, I think it was an Instagram reel, but it's selecting where you want to paint first, and then just painting in that section, selecting the next section, painting there, selecting the next, and so on and so forth. And when I say it out loud, it seems really obvious, like, duh, that's kind of, you know, if you want to do something like scales or something, that's kind of the way to do it. But I hadn't actually thought of that before I saw that video, and I was like, that's genius. So that bit of art advice that I got from the internet was one of the rare ones that was actually useful, especially to the making of this, where I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So yeah, it was definitely a lot more time consuming, but for me as an artist who usually works in closed areas, like whether that be, well, primarily with line art, it made things a lot simpler, a lot easier to swallow, and just be like, okay, I am working on this one area first. Nothing outside this area can be painted. I just need to focus on this, and then move to the next one, focus there, move to the next one, focus there. The one part that didn't really fit that process was the nose of the Leviathan, which is where I got like an actual taste of what generally painting is like, because I couldn't just separate out one like little fold of the like nose ridge, I guess that would be called. I couldn't just separate one little wrinkle out of it, so I could only work in that big area. And I will say, it was a nice break, but also that was very nerve-wracking, and I was still very much depending on the lines that I had drawn as references. So yeah, my method of art, of painting specifically, is very much a hybrid of painting and also working within the lines that aren't there because it's a painting and there's no line art. Yeah. And one of my favorite areas on this painting, actually, other than like that scale right between the horns, is the yellows. They're just so good. And I never painted yellows before this point, and I was just like, oh, it's so much fun to paint yellows. Just the shading always shows up really nicely, and the highlights glow. It's good. Yeah, you'll see what I mean a little bit later, but yeah. And I did do some of this on stream. You might have caught that stream, and yeah, this is what I was working on. Don't mind the current song there down in the corner. That is not at all accurate. It was just for my stream setup. Yeah, I haven't been doing art streams all that much recently, just because, like I said, I wasn't in the best state of mind, state of being, state of existence, really, to be doing art, so I haven't done a lot of art streams. But I do enjoy doing them. One of the best things that art streams do for me is just, it forces me to sit down and not get distracted and just work. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever experienced this. Like, I kind of like to call it the studio effect, or studio phenomenon. Just like working in an area with other people drastically improves my personal productivity. Like in high school, I did an animation class, and just being around other people who are also working on the same like things as me, it just helped me so much, and I was so happy. Like, I could joke around with people, and I could still like keep getting work done, but there was a sense of camaraderie there that you just don't normally get if you're just working on your own. So apart from the particulars of productivity and being forced to, batten down and focus on on something, I really love doing live streams just because there's people around and I can talk to them and keep going. There's a sense of community behind me when I'm doing this kind of work. Yeah. Yeah, one of the... you can kind of see it now. I was really struggling with the face on the wizard. Yeah, I'm not very good at doing faces. I can't do them very well in line art because I haven't done any studies to, truly understand a face. And things like hands I can reference well enough just, with my own, but faces are so deceptively intricate. I will be the first to admit I did not do a good job shading the face, especially before the highlights get put in. She looks like she has a 5 o'clock shadow. Yeah. And she has, no lips and no nostrils. It was a very bizarre kind of mix between realism and my usual simplified cartoonish style, and it's not the best part of this, but it's not the focal point, so it's fine. At least that's what I'm gonna tell myself. Okay, so one of my favorite parts of this drawing is all of the trim everywhere, the gold trim and the blue trim on the bottom of the robe. It was just so good. It's one of those parts where the shading and the highlights just add so much to it. Even without the shading on the rest of the robe, the shading on the trim just makes it so much better, more lively, more glowing, and it's one of my favorite things on this. And I didn't do this with any reference, which makes me like it more. This was all just pulled out of my butt, and it looks great. Not trying to brag, I'm just really happy with this. Another little detail that I really like adding to my art is in clothing. If there is going to be a seam present and prominent, you draw it in or show it somehow. You can see on the arm, there is that seam going down the arm, and I even included a little gusset in the armpit area. I know most of you don't know what a gusset is. It just helps with the movement of your arm. And one of my favorite details is just adding things like that. Just add a sense of realism to whatever you're making. It's just a little extra detail that doesn't take too long to make. It generally, usually, if you keep it simple enough, it's not that hard to implement either. You just draw a seam down the side and that's it. But yeah, it just adds so much realism and character and okay, yeah, this is a real person, she's wearing real clothing, and it's yeah. You can see it in some of my other works as well. I did 4 years ago, I think now. It was my senior year of high school. I was doing another art piece on stream. Some of you may remember it. It was the two people swinging on a rope, and I added a seam to one of their pants. Well, one of them was wearing the dress, the other one was wearing pants. Anyways, I added a seam to the pants, and it was that is my favorite part of that drawing. My profile picture, if you look close enough and have your brightness up high enough, you can see the side seam and the little reinforcement patch of the shirt. Yeah, I just love adding little details like that. So one of my most favorite parts of the original is the fin. And most of the other parts of the original aren't very good compared to my current standards. They're not that great, but one of the best parts of that was in the fin I added glowing veins, and I really wanted to pay homage to that. That was my favorite detail of that piece. So I tried my best to recreate that here. The white that I use for the veins might be a touch extreme. But it's just that little bit of realism that just adds so much to this. Yeah. And around here, when I started adding the highlights, like during all the rest of this, when I was doing all the shadows, I was like, I'm not sure how this is going. I kind of don't really like it. It was just not that great. And then I started adding the highlights, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. Like, I can tell you a million things that are wrong with this, but I love this so much. Like, the shadows on their own, they add depth and form to the drawing, but the highlights, that's what adds the life. And I really got a feel for that on this one. I will be honest, my lighting is not the most realistic. I had imagined where the lights would be, and I didn't really, it's not the most accurate, but the lighting and sense of the highlights is probably the best that I've ever done so far. Yeah, honestly, I feel like most of this is just me fangirling about this painting, but yeah. I cannot tell you how many times during especially the latter half of this, I would do that little squee thing, shake my arms and just be like, oh, it looks so good! I would do that so much during the last little bit of this, which was a welcome change from how this project started, because I did the sketch, I laid down the flat colors, and then every single time I would open up the project, I would just be like, I don't know where this is going. This is awful, I just can't. I do not have the skills to do this in the way that I want to, and then I would close the project. But once I finally got past that hump of the shading and figuring out quite what I was doing, then it really just started to be fun again. And I'm sure that there are quite a few other artists who can relate, but sometimes there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance between fun and technique in art, and this one was a perfect combo of the two. Well, not perfect, but better than most. Okay, if you know me and you have seen my art before, you know that I love to do these little swirly things with sparkles and magic. And yeah, that's about what that is there. Yeah, so this little flowery bit at the bottom, this is actually from the game. As you accumulate pips, which is what you do to actually cast spells, you get this little aura around your character, and I was trying to recreate that here. Now, in-game, it's pretty much just light streaks and stuff, but I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting. So I kind of went for it's kind of like a water splash mixed with a rose. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing throughout this entire process of making this little bottom thing. But it turned out so good, considering I was just going with the flow. I don't know what the heck. I did not have any technique to this. I was just okay, let's try this and this and this, and I probably spent a solid 15 minutes going through all the different layer effects that I could do. like, and doing all of that, and it finally turned out like this, and it may take up a bit too much space and be a little too eye-catching in the final product, but oh my gosh, I love how it turned out. So in this project, I really just wanted to make sure that I wasn't giving up the last second, because that's what I tend to do. Like, I get to the end and then I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm pretty much done, so I'm just going to fudge the last little bit of this and it'll be fine. This is not a project that I wanted to do that on, and I succeeded in not doing that. I am absurdly pleased with the final product. Like, usually after a few days I start hating it, just because I've looked at it so often, but right now, I am still in love with this as the first second I finished it. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this little different approach to the speed arts. I just wanted to give a little bit of flair, a little bit of voiceover to it to maybe spice things up. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and this is completely accidental. It was not planned at all, but happy birthday, Wizard101. Thank you for 15 years of fun and magic, and I can't wait to see where you go in the future.